Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Russia has amassed more than 150,000 troops around Ukraine's borders.
The Winter Olympics will officially end this Sunday. A window is opening up for Vladimir Putin. Many in the West say the Russian president will attack Ukraine after the event. So has Russia begun preparing for an invasion? A series of developments in the last 24 hours have raised concerns. Russia has boosted its troop deployments near the border. Around 190,000 troops have now surrounded Ukraine. There is shelling in eastern Ukraine. People living in Donbass are being asked to leave. Ukraine says Russian separatists have committed 60 ceasefire violations in one day, and tomorrow Putin will oversee a massive nuclear drill. With him will be Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko. Is Russia raising the stakes then? Is this the beginning of a war in Ukraine or just another false alarm? On Gravitas tonight we'll discuss that. Also on the show, has a Chinese Manchurian candidate entered the Australian Parliament? Australia's top security agency says Beijing tried to meddle in the 2019 election. We'll bring you the details. A new and stealthy version of Omicron has spread to at least 69 countries. Scientists say it can cause severe illness. In Pakistan, Bill Gates did not get the warm reception he had hoped for. We'll tell you why the women of Pakistan are miffed with the Microsoft founder. And is wine harmful? The European Parliament is being accused of watering down warning labels on Europe's favorite drink. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Sri Lanka's former defense secretary and ex-police chief Pujith Jayasundara have been acquitted and released in Easter attack case. The bombings killed 269 people in 2019 and injured around 500. Canada's parliament cancelled its session as police is set to clear the trucker-led protest that has choked the capital's streets for 3 weeks. Meanwhile, Canadians stage protests against COVID mandates, sitting in hot tubs in freezing temperatures. Hong Kong has identified more than 20,000 hotel rooms for quarantine accommodation as the global financial hub battles a surge in COVID-19 cases. The EU has challenged China at the World Trade Organization, accusing Beijing of preventing European tech companies from using foreign courts to defend their patents. Hundreds of people demonstrated in Brussels on Thursday against the visit of Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who is attending the EU-African Union summit. The demonstrators denounced the actions of the Ethiopian government in the region of Tigray, where a civil war has been going on for more than 15 months. Ecuador's National Assembly has approved regulations that will allow women and girls to get easier access to abortions in cases of rape. The decision came following a constitutional court's ruling last April that decriminalized such abortions. More than 280 people were evacuated from a ferry in northwestern Greece that caught fire overnight while heading to southern Italy. Storm Eunice batters Britain and Ireland with record winds of up to 195 kilometers per hour, knocking out power for tens of thousands of people and forcing planes to abort landings. International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach has criticized Kamila Valieva's coaching staff's treatment of the 15-year-old. After Valieva exited the ice rink in tears following her performance, her coach Eteri Tutberidze did not comfort the Russian and instead asked her why she had given up. Valieva finished fourth in the figure skating final. Lewis Hamilton has finally confirmed he will return to Formula One for the 2022 season. The seven-time world champion admitted that he did consider his future in the sport during the off-season, but said he was raring to go as his team Mercedes launched their new challenger, the W13. This comes just a day after FIA sacked race director Michael Masi in the aftermath of the controversial 2021 season finale.
What is happening in Ukraine? Is a proxy war underway, or is Russia pulling its troops back? In the last 24 hours, tensions have increased. Reports say 190,000 Russian troops have now surrounded Ukraine. The shelling in eastern Ukraine has not stopped, and Russia seems to be escalating tensions, this time with a nuclear provocation. Also, more videos are coming out of Donbass. This is the Stanitsia Luhanska town. A kindergarten was targeted here yesterday. Bombs have now reached homes. One eyewitness captured this. Soon enough, one of the shells fell on a house. A man was seen desperately trying to put out the fire. Ukraine says it has recorded 60 ceasefire violations in 24 hours, 60. Who is behind the shelling? Ukraine is blaming Russian separatists. One soldier is injured. Kiev claims a city was targeted by tanks.
You are already aware that the enemy has shelled Ukrainian territories with heavy artillery banned by Minsk agreements. Civilian infrastructure at Stanitsia Luhanska was damaged. At least 2 people were hurt. In Marinka, 1 civilian and 1 serviceman have been injured. Troitsky came under fire from a tank.
As the shelling continues, Russian-backed separatists have ordered an evacuation. They want people living in Donetsk to move to Russia. Separatists say Moscow has agreed to provide accommodation to those who leave, and women, children and the elderly should be evacuated first. Why is this significant? Because these separatists say that Ukraine is preparing to launch an offensive.
The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, in the near future, will give the order for his soldiers to go on the offensive. Temporary escape will protect your life and health, and that of your relatives.
As if on cue, the Russian president also issued a statement. He referred to eastern Ukraine and said the situation there is deteriorating.
Right now, we are seeing a deterioration of the situation in Donbass.
Is this the beginning of an invasion? Vladimir Putin is raising the stakes. A massive nuclear drill is being planned for tomorrow. Usually they happen in October, but this time Moscow has moved up these drills. The Russian president plans to personally oversee this exercise. Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko is also invited. Remember, Belarus shares a border with Ukraine, also with Russia, of course, and Russian forces are already conducting drills in Belarus till the 20th. They're within striking distance of Kiev. Lukashenko is a loyal partner for Putin. He has offered to host Russian nukes in the past. Now, Moscow wants to remind the world that it is a nuclear power. Tomorrow's exercise will involve Russia's strategic forces. They will conduct multiple practice launches of intercontinental ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. In the past 2 days, Russia says it has also withdrawn some troops. And throughout, it has maintained that it will not start a war. But Kiev is not taking chances. The Ukrainian forces have launched drills of their own. Helicopters, tanks and ground forces will train for the next 10 days. And although Ukraine denies the possibility of a large-scale Russian invasion, its top ally, the United States, insists that war is imminent. America says Putin must demonstrate that he won't attack.
So let me make this simple. The Russian government can announce today, with no qualification, equivocation, or deflection, that Russia will not invade Ukraine. State it clearly, state it plainly to the world, and then demonstrate it by sending your troops, your tanks, your planes back to their barracks and hangars, and sending your diplomats to the negotiating table.
Earlier, US President Joe Biden spoke and said the threat of a Russian invasion remains, quote unquote, very high.
How high is the threat of a Russian invasion right now?
It's very high.
Why?
It's very high because they have not moved any of their troops out. They've moved more troops in. Number one. Number two, we have reason to believe that they are engaged in a false flag operation to have an excuse to go in. Every indication we have is they're prepared to go into Ukraine, attack Ukraine.
America's assessments are being mocked. First they said an invasion is imminent. Then they said it would happen on the 16th of February and 50,000 civilians will be killed. Then they said it could happen any day. This has been going on for more than 3 weeks now. Here's the latest from US Intel. It says a Russian invasion could play out in 3 stages. Stage 1, Russia will manufacture a pretext, a violent event. It can be real or fake. This is what the Americans are saying, something that Ukraine will be blamed for. Stage 2 is theatrics, according to them. Moscow will convene emergency meetings. Proclamations will be issued from the Kremlin. They will declare why Russia needs to respond militarily to the so-called crisis. And stage 3 is an attack on Ukraine. Russia will strike Ukraine with bombs. Communications will be jammed. There will be cyber attacks on Ukrainian institutions. This is what the US assessment says. The United Kingdom is going one step further. It says that Vladimir Putin has already made up his mind. He will invade, and Russian false flag operations have begun.
I wish I could give everybody better news about this, but I have to tell you that the picture is continuing to be very grim. And today, as I'm sure you've already picked up, a kindergarten was shelled in what we're taking to be what we know was a false flag operation designed to discredit the Ukrainians, designed to create a pretext, a spurious provocation for Russian action. We fear very much that is the kind of thing we'll see more of over the next few days.
So the West continues to press the panic button and dismiss Russia's claims of a withdrawal. Western leaders have gathered in Munich. A 3-day-long security conference is underway, and they call it Davos for Defense. The Munich Security Conference is an annual affair. Needless to say, this time the focus is on Ukraine. They've invited Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, and he's going. Russia too is invited, but he's not going there. It's not going there, in fact, and this is a first. Even in 2014, just before Russia annexed Crimea, they participated in the Munich conference. Not this time, though. It shows how deep the divisions have become. Next week, foreign ministers of the US and Russia will meet again. The good part is they're still talking. The bad part is all of this talk is not delivering a solution. Perhaps they should pay heed to what India said at the United Nations Security Council. We must take into account the quote-unquote legitimate security interests of all countries. Any steps that increase tension should be avoided by all sides. Have you ever heard about FOMO? It's called the fear of missing out, FOMO. You see someone planning a party or going on vacation, suddenly you fear being left out. FOMO happens to everyone. Even Xi Jinping. You see, China is a communist state. They don't have free and fair elections. So Xi Jinping is suffering from FOMO. What does he do? Interfere in democratic elections elsewhere. This time it's Australia. Earlier this week, a major argument broke out in the Australian Parliament. The issue was China. Prime Minister Scott Morrison attacked his principal opposition, the Labour Party. He accused them of helping the Chinese. Listen in.
Mr. Speaker, and he said that as a shadow defence, Mr. Speaker. So I tell you where I do agree, Mr. Speaker.
The Prime Minister...
We got another Manchurian...
I didn't hear it. What? Just hang on. Just wait. Just everybody calm down for a moment.
That's a strict no in Parliament. Morrison called the Deputy Labour leader a Manchurian candidate. What does that mean? Basically, a politician who is working for the enemy. For example, if a US senator is on Russia's payroll or a Russian oligarch is a CIA spy, the idea is to destroy a country from within. Are Manchurian candidates real? It's a bit of a stretch. Politicians running for office are subjected to intense background checks and scrutiny. Having said that, allegations do pop up. Henry Kissinger was called a Manchurian candidate in 1975. This was after he brokered the US-China normalization. So was Donald Trump. But these charges were never proved. They were made up by political rivals. Chances are this one is also the same. Australia's federal elections are slated for the month of May. Prime Minister Scott Morrison is facing multiple domestic challenges. His economy is struggling, his lockdowns have hurt livelihoods, and his party is trailing in the opinion polls. So Morrison desperately needs a win, and nothing sells more than national security. Does that mean that China is innocent? Far from it. They may not be a Manchurian candidate, but Chinese interference is certainly a fact. Australia's top security agency has admitted it. Last week, they published a damning report on the 2019 elections. I'll show you the major takeaways. Number one, a foreign power tried to fund political campaigns in Australia. Number two, this plot was led by a so-called puppeteer. And number three, if elected, these candidates would relay information to foreign agents. Now, this report is like a spy novel. It does not name the foreign power or the puppeteer, but some Australian legislators have made up their mind. They think the puppeteer is this man, Chinese-Australian businessman Chow Chak Wing. Does he fit the bill? We'll lay out the facts for you and you can decide. Since 2004, Chow has donated $4 million to politicians plus $45 million for Australian universities. He has the clout and the pockets. Chow was also accused of bribing Australian politician John Ash. Who gave him that order? According to Australian MPs, it was China. On his part, Chow denies all of these charges. He calls himself a businessman and a philanthropist. Maybe he is. But China's murky role in Australian elections is beyond doubt. In 2019, a Liberal Party member was approached by Chinese agents. They wanted him to run for parliament. Months later, he was found dead in his apartment. In 2020, a Chinese Australian was charged under the new election interference law. His crime? Helping the Chinese Communist Party. Why is Beijing so focused on Australia? We can think of two reasons. Number one, the strategic importance of Australia, a key US ally, a major Pacific power, and a country moving away from China's grasp. Naturally, China wants to change that. And number two, China wants to weaponize ethnicity. Australia's total population is 26 million. Out of these, 1.2 million have Chinese ancestry. Beijing thinks it can turn these people into double agents, and it's a divisive policy. And sadly, some Australian politicians are falling for it. Instead of targeting China, they are targeting Chinese Australians. The fact is, meddling abroad is not new for China. Reports say they helped Rodrigo Duterte win in the Philippines. The FBI says they funded Democrats in 1996. In Nepal, they're allegedly helping the communist parties. You can try stopping China, but they will keep meddling. So what's the solution? Bipartisan opposition to China. That's the only way forward. Parties must stop weaponizing national security. Instead, they must synchronize policies. I'll give you the example of US. Joe Biden is continuing most of Donald Trump's China policies. The fact is, he's expanding them. Australia must do the same. Taking on China is not a partisan issue anymore. It is a national and global interest. And here's another reason to take on China. The Wuhan virus, it has mutated once again. A subvariant of Omicron is spreading rapidly. It's called BA2. And it's fast becoming the dominant strain in several countries. The world is back to asking the same questions. How deadly is this variant? Will it endanger the progress made so far? Will vaccines work on it? And how do we stop it from spreading? Here's a report on all you need to know.
The Omicron surge is slowing down. Infections are dropping globally. Restrictions are being removed. But there's a new cause of concern. BA2, a subvariant of Omicron. It's spreading incredibly fast, displacing its sibling in several countries. In Denmark, it's now the dominant variant, triggering 50,000 new infections in just one day. Reports say that BA2 also appears to be becoming a major Omicron lineage. In parts of India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, China, the Philippines, South Africa, Germany, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The steady rise of this subvariant indicates that it has a growth advantage over other circulating variants. This has alarmed health authorities in several countries. Germany says that the BA2 could endanger the progress it has made so far.
Should the BA2 variant spread further in Germany, then it would put our success in danger.
The fears are understandable. But is BA2 really that dangerous? Scientists are split. Some studies say that BA2 may cause severe disease. But the WHO disagrees. It says that this subvariant is certainly more transmissible, but there's no evidence to suggest that it's more lethal.
If we start to see an increase, we could see some further infections of BA.2 after this big wave of BA.1. And I know a lot of people are concerned about this, but this is something that we are looking at. So BA.2 is certainly on the rise, but this is also Omicron. We don't see any difference in terms of severity between BA.2 compared to BA.1. Omicron is not quote-unquote mild.
What about vaccines? Will they work on this variant? Yes, say most scientists. They say vaccines appear to be just as effective against BA2 as they are against other forms of Omicron. So most of the assessments so far are reassuring, but the problem is that countries are not doing enough to slow down the transmission of this subvariant. It may not be as deadly, it may not cause severe symptoms, but it's still spreading and certainly mutating. So we still cannot afford to let our guard down.
On the 17th of February, Pakistan received a very special guest, the second richest man in the world, also the co-founder of Microsoft, Bill Gates. He went there on the special invitation of Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan, a fact that he could not help but stress on. He came on my invitation, said Imran Khan in a self-assuring tweet. The question is, what for? Why did Bill Gates go to Islamabad? To discuss the elimination of polio. Now, for the unversed, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is part of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, and Pakistan is among the only 2 countries in the world where polio virus continues to paralyze children. The other one is Afghanistan. So Bill Gates went there to assess the progress Pakistan is making, also to provide some humanitarian assistance. But despite these gestures, he seems to have upset certain Pakistani citizens, women in particular. That's because he did not meet them. There were no women present in any of his meetings, and Pakistani activists are raising this. A fierce debate is on. People are sharing pictures of his interactions, slamming the Pakistan government for the lack of representation and questioning Bill Gates for not trying to reach out to them. They're sharing reports like these, pointing out how Pakistani women have been at the front lines of polio eradication despite all odds, how they've been leading anti-polio campaigns, working in difficult border regions and persuading families to immunize children. Last we checked, the Gates Foundation had not acknowledged their complaints. The Pakistani opposition, meanwhile, is slamming Imran Khan for insulting Bill Gates. They're sharing a picture of him seated on a revolving chair, which they say was no way to treat a foreign guest. Maryam Nawaz Sharif has called it rude and arrogant. Ehsan Iqbal, another opposition leader, says it shows how Imran Khan has an inflated ego. He shared some figures on how Microsoft was worth more than Pakistan's entire GDP and how its annual revenue is more than Pakistan's total annual exports. It's amusing that political discourse in Pakistan has fallen to such a level where politicians do not hesitate in insulting their own country, also the miseries of their own people. Look at this headline. A minister in Pakistan has asked people to use less fuel in order to avoid a price hike. His name is Shibli Faraz. He's the Federal Minister for Science and Technology, and he wants people to reduce fuel consumption. If they don't, prices will rise, he says.
हम यही उम्मीद कर सकते हैं कि ये प्राइसेस एक तो नीचे आए, कुछ जो है तो हमें जहां तक मुमकिन हो सके थोड़ा कम फ्यूल इस्तेमाल करना चाहिए। और मैं समझता हूं क्योंकि सख्त वक्त में यही होता है कि जिंदगी देखिए नॉर्मल नहीं रह सकती है।
You heard that. Life can't always stay normal. You've got to adjust. How about telling this to Imran Khan? He's struggling to adjust to the changing political dynamics. The army has abandoned him. The allies are conspiring against him. The opposition is planning a no-confidence vote. There are rumors of another nationwide movement. We hope he has enough political fuel to adjust to these changes. Every day we learn something new about China. More bad than good. This week too, we learned something new. If you buy illegal plants in China, you could be imprisoned for 7 years. If you buy endangered animals, you could end up spending your whole life in jail, or worse, the death penalty. But what if you buy trafficked women or children? Your maximum punishment is 3 years in jail, even less if there was no abuse. I'll recap that for you. 7 years for buying an illegal plant, 3 years or less for buying a trafficked human being. This sums up China's attitude towards women. Why are we talking about this now? Because a new video has emerged on Chinese social media, and I have to warn you, it is not easy to watch. This video is from the Jiangsu province. Notice the woman's neck. There's a chain around it, and that chain runs all the way to the wall. This woman is battered, disheveled, and chained. Remember, this is happening in 2022. This is happening in a country that wants to be a superpower, that wants to run the world, yet Chinese women are treated like slaves and cattle. This video was shot in January. So far, it has more than 2 billion views. Chinese citizens are furious. They began asking questions after seeing this. They asked whether this woman was trafficked. Guess what the Chinese government did? Well, what they do best, they lied. The Chinese government said this woman was not trafficked, that she was married in 1998 and now had 8 children. Then why was she in chains? Apparently, she had a mental illness. The Chinese government could see only one crime in this whole story. The woman has 8 kids, but China had a one-child policy. That's all they could see. The chains, the dubious background story, none of it mattered. The only crime was having more than one child. As expected, people did not buy the story. And some of them took matters into their own hands. 2 Chinese women set off to help this chained woman. They trekked to this tiny village in eastern Jiangsu. Guess what Beijing did? Again, no surprises. Both these women were arrested. You wouldn't expect anything less from China. For them, this is not a crime. It's a bad headline, especially in the middle of the Winter Olympics. So they lied about the chained woman, arrested people who tried to help her, and brushed this story under the carpet. Now, normally, such a strategy works. The state media successfully kills an anti-China story, but this time it did not work. The video grew bigger on social media, and finally China had to admit the truth. The chained woman is indeed a victim of trafficking. She does have 8 children. She was married once, but in 1996 she was diagnosed with a mental illness. She was sent to Jiangsu for treatment. Instead, she became a victim of trafficking. And this story reveals the nexus of 3 crimes: China's harassment of the mentally ill, their blind eye to trafficking, and the inhuman treatment of women. Put together, it's a massive crime syndicate. I can show you the chronology. For decades, China followed the one-child policy. Most families preferred boys over girls. The result was this: a massive gender imbalance, more men than women in the Chinese society. So what did families do? They bought girls for marriage. Reports say as young as 14. These girls were raised in the same family as brides for their son. How big is this problem? Well, this being China, it's hard to say. Their courts and police are not exactly transparent. But we do have some conservative estimates. Reports say 20,000 trafficking cases were reported in 2012. In 2019, 4,500 cases were filed. Again, these are conservative estimates. Chances are the real numbers are much higher. Does the Chinese regime have a plan to solve it? In fact, here's a better question. Do they want to solve it? China's criminal code was written in 1979. Here's what it says on trafficking. If you sell a woman or child, you could get 5 years in jail or even death. But if you buy a woman or child, no punishment. It was amended in 1997. Buyers could now be punished with 3 years in jail. But even then, there was a catch. If the victim was not abused, no punishment. A second amendment was introduced in 2015. The no abuse clause was changed. Today, even if the victim is not abused, you will be punished. But your jail time will be less. And these amendments, frankly, are toothless. There cannot be an excuse for trafficking women. The presence or absence of abuse should not affect the judgment. But then again, we're talking about China. They silenced a world-famous tennis player. They made her disappear for weeks. What chance do ordinary Chinese women stand? Global agencies must take note of this trafficking ring. Who knows how many Chinese women are suffering? How many victims have been silenced? And none of this can happen without the state's tacit support. Just think about it. We're talking about a regime that decides how many children you can have, what you can say on the internet, what video games you can play. How hard could it be for them to crack down on trafficking if they wanted to? We'll turn to West Asia now, where the Iran nuclear deal may be saved after all. Remember, this is Joe Biden's pet project. He desperately wants a win. He helped negotiate this deal as vice president. But his predecessor, Donald Trump, pulled America out. Now Biden has a chance to revive it. So far, he has invested a lot of political capital on this effort. Until now, there was little to show for it. Months of deadlock, threats, counter-threats, but no progress. At the Vienna talks, the equation is complicated. America and Iran are not talking directly. Iran talks to Europe, and then Europe relays the message to America. It's a complicated setup. And until now, an unsuccessful one. But this week, there appears to have been a breakthrough. Let me show you what Iran's top negotiator said. After weeks of intensive talks, we are closer than ever to an agreement. Our negotiating partners need to be realistic, avoid intransigence, and heed lessons of past 4 years. Time for serious decisions. Coming from Iran, this is huge. They're saying a deal is, quote-unquote, closer than ever. What about the Americans? The same assessment. The U.S. State Department says the talks are in the final stages.
Is that we are in the midst of the very final stages of, as I said before, a complex negotiation with the key stakeholders here. This is really the decisive period during which we'll be able to determine whether a mutual return to compliance with the JCPOA is in the offing or if it's not.
The French are even more optimistic. Paris says the nuclear deal could be revived in days, but two questions remain. One, are Russia and China on board? And two, what will clinch the deal for Tehran? Let's deal with the first question. The French foreign minister says all parties are in agreement. Presumably, that includes Russia and China. President Macron did discuss the Iran nuclear deal with President Xi Jinping on Wednesday. Here's what the French statement said. The two sides agreed to continue and intensify joint efforts to reach an agreement in Vienna and ensure that Iran fully complies with its nuclear obligations. Interestingly, the Chinese statement does not mention this. Moscow and Beijing have not set any timetable for reviving the deal. Question number two, what will clinch the deal for Iran? Two things. Number one, the lifting of U.S. sanctions. Think of it as a gesture of goodwill. And number two, a political statement from the U.S. Congress. Now, this demand is very important. Iran wants the U.S. Congress to ratify the nuclear deal. Will it change anything? Well, technically, no. Such a resolution does not have a binding effect on the White House. Having said that, there is symbolic value. If Biden signs the deal, it is one person's promise, even if he's the U.S. president. If the Congress signs the deal, it is bipartisan. Symbolically, it is a promise by the people of America. And you cannot blame Iran for this demand. America is not exactly famous for keeping their word. They betrayed Iran once in 2018. If Biden's successor is Republican, chances are they will do the same. So Tehran is right in asking for a guarantee. The question is, can President Biden secure it? 175 House Republicans and 33 Republican senators have written a letter to their president. Their threat is straightforward. Anything you decide in Vienna will have to be approved by us. If you don't consult us, we will kill your nuclear deal. Can the Republicans do that? Well, looking at the numbers, no, they cannot. The Democrats control both the Senate and the House, so chances are the deal will be ratified easily. But there is a bigger problem. What Iran is looking for is bipartisan support, that the next Republican president will not walk out of the deal. And this letter that the Republicans wrote defeats that purpose. It basically tells Iran that Republicans are not on board. And this controversy exposes two American failings. A, the falling prestige of the US. Nobody takes their promise seriously anymore. And B, Biden's repeated failure to unite the country. This nuclear deal could be a game changer for West Asia. Yet Biden's pals in Washington cannot be bothered. So that was politics and policy, and a lot of it. Let's talk about innovation and technology now. You and I will soon be able to take a flying taxi to the airport, we're told. Companies around the world are working towards bringing flying cars to our cities. These flying cabs will reduce travel time to a fourth and will be cheaper than a helicopter ride. You may be able to book one in 2 years' time. Here's a report.
It may not be too long before you see air taxis in the sky. We are talking 2025. That's 3 years from now. A Japanese airline plans to bring air taxis to Osaka by then. Flying vehicles will be connecting the airport to the city centers. They will reduce travel time to 1/4. In Singapore, air taxis could be taking off before 2025. The country is looking at a 2024 launch. The plan is similar. The taxis will connect the Changi Airport to Marina Bay and Sentosa. They will reduce travel time and hassle. Singapore completed flying taxi trials in 2019. All that's left now is a commercial rollout. A popular Asian airline is planning to bring air taxis to all Southeast Asian countries by 2025. Orders have been placed for at least 100 flying cars. Boeing is building these flying taxis. So is Airbus, Hyundai, and several other big companies. Now the question is, how will these flying taxis look? Well, very different, not just from our present-day cars, but from each other. Air taxis will come in several shapes and sizes. Some will have helicopter-type rotors, some airplane-type wings. There will also be air taxis that will look like our conventional cars with wings. Basically, designers are going all out. These flying cars are expected to cover 280 kilometers in an hour. An airplane covers up to 930 kilometers per hour. A fast car on a highway covers 120. So, our flying taxis will be somewhere in between cars and aeroplanes. But isn't that where helicopters come in? If the idea is to have urban air transport and flying vehicles that take off vertically, can't we just have more choppers instead? Well, we can. But air taxis are more advanced. They are also quieter than helicopters, at least 100 times. They are also safer, cleaner, and cheaper. Currently, a helicopter ride from Manhattan to New York's John F. Kennedy Airport costs $200. A shared air taxi ride will cost $70. That's less than half. Urban air taxis are basically cleaner, cheaper, and better-looking choppers. A Frost & Sullivan study found 430,000 such air taxis could be flying in our skies by 2040. Morgan Stanley believes the autonomous urban aircraft market could be worth $1.5 trillion by 2040. That's a lot of money and a lot of time saved in traffic. We look forward to happy landings.
That is the end of another week. How many of you are looking forward to wrapping up work, maybe going home and unwinding over a glass of wine? Not too long ago, we told you a glass of wine is not fine. We told you how wine, like every other alcohol, causes cancer, how wine can kill you. And you may be wondering, what calls for this grim reminder on a Friday evening? Well, our elected parliamentarians, they never fail to surprise us. Members of European Parliament are encouraging wine drinking. Something unusual has happened in the European Parliament. A special committee on beating cancer had put forward a proposal. This committee wanted Europe to have warning labels on wine bottles, and these labels would warn consumers about the risk of alcohol drinking, basically flag the link between wine drinking and cancer. But lawmakers voted against these labels, and you won't believe why. Members of the European Parliament said moderate consumption of wine is part of quote-unquote well-known Mediterranean diet. So the parliamentarians came up with a counter-offer, more like a compensatory offer. Instead of a cancer label, why not add a cautionary label? You know, stick labels telling consumers about the risk of excessive the risk of excessive drinking. Now, this proposal, they happily voted for. Basically, they agreed to tell the consumers what they already know, that drinking too much is bad. But these members of European Parliament's MEPs refused to tell consumers that wine drinking can cause cancer. This information the Parliament hid. Now, in Europe alone, an estimated 10% of all cancer cases in men and 3% of all cancer cases in women are attributed to alcohol consumption. Not many people know of this, neither in Europe nor outside. In fact, not many people know that a glass of wine is not fine. We are living under the impression that wine is good for our body, basically our heart. It is not. Wine, like every other alcohol, is dangerous. It causes cancer. It has the potential to kill you. But there is no awareness about this. The health label was meant to create that awareness. It was meant to help fight cancer. Why do you think the European Parliament shot it down? Not because of Mediterranean cuisine or culture, but because of greed, because of money. I'll show you some numbers. The European Union is the world's leading wine producer. It produces 64% of the world's wine. It is home to 45% of the global wine growing area. People living in the EU consume 48% of the world's wine. Imagine this. The rest of the world put together, Asia, America, Australia, Africa, consume 52% of the world's wine. The EU alone guzzles 48%. Any idea how much money Europe is making from all of this wine? Its wine market is worth $147.5 billion. Wine is the European Union's largest agri-food export. If people stop drinking wine, how will Europe make money? If people start living a healthier lifestyle, what will happen to Italy's wine and cheese? Not too long ago, the World Health Organization put out a press release. It said, based on data collected between 2010 and 2016, it has been found that 290,000 people lose their life in Europe every year because of alcohol attributable cases. The WHO urged Europe to do more to reduce these numbers. But who cares about numbers or cancer when the focus is money? Hiding cancer risk from wine bottles helps Europe make that money. No wonder a factual label is being hotly contested in the European Parliament. Italian MEPs were the ones leading this campaign to hide critical information. Italy, FYI, is the world's largest wine producer. And 3 MEPs, Paolo De Castro, Herbert Dorfman and Pina Piscierno, led the campaign to hammer the health warning label. They later issued a victory statement. Let me tell you what the statement said. We have managed to get rid of the senseless recommendation to put health warnings on wine bottles as we do with packets of cigarettes. So health warnings have apparently become senseless. Well, how will sense prevail when you don't mind compromising on health because of economy? Let me tell you how the story ends. The European Parliament has rejected the cancer label. They won't tell people that wine drinking can cause cancer. They've rejected the theory that there is no safe level for alcohol consumption, meaning a glass of wine is not fine. Even a sip of wine is not fine. That's what science says. In fact, science is pushing for this awareness. But European Parliament is blocking critical communication because it has put its money elsewhere. The end result is this. It reads, cancer 1, economy 1, and health 0. With that, it's a wrap, leaving you with Gravitas Images. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday. And Palki Sharma Upadhyay reports from